Before we get too deep into specific workflows within Xero, I'm going to have a look at the settings area. I'm not going to go through every single area in complete detail, but I'm just going to give you an idea of where some of the key options that you can set are and some of the things that I may reference in. So once again, I'm in my demo company here, and from the dashboard, I'm just going to go up to settings here. So the first thing you'll notice is I have got some favorites already in here, but in this case, I'm just going to go through to my general settings. So I've now got settings options here by area. One thing to note is that you can change what is in your favorites drop-down. So at the moment I have these three, and they're denoted in here by the little blue stars. So I can click into any particular one. So for example, if I don't use inventory, I'll take that off of my favorites, but I may want to add on users and financial settings. So this change won't reflect until you click on it again and view it. So just be aware of that. If you want to check if anything's been done, click off, make some changes again, and then click back on. So each setting area here does different things. As I say, I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I'll show you, or at least if I don't go into a section, I'll explain what it does do. So I'm just going to run down the top section from left to right, and then I'll go through some add features and finally the connect options. So organization settings. Within organization settings, you can set up your address, phone number. You can choose whether you want to be public or not. So if you are public, then Xero will list you on their website as a user. And you can also put in things like a fax number and email address as well. Tracking area is quite an interesting one. If you want to track certain areas of your business in reporting, you can set it up in this area here. So you can add tracking categories, and then you can have category options. So for example, if you have 3 or 4 departments in your business, maybe you have a commercial arm and you have a retail arm, you could add a tracking category and then have retail or commercial as the options to pick from when you do invoices or bills. So in this case here, I've broken this down by region, so I can see within my business what of my invoices or bills come from customers or suppliers that are east, north, south, or west. And I'll show you this in a little bit more detail as and when we go through the invoices and bills section. So for the moment, I'll go back out to my general settings. Conversion balances. I'm not going to go into this because, again, this is accountants area, but in here you can update account balances or enter account balances if you move from an incumbent accounting system such as MyOb or QuickBooks. Tax rates are an option that are available as well. As I mentioned in my very first video, if you are based in one of the main countries that Xero operates, such as I am here in Australia, then you will have a lot of tax rates that are already set up for you. So all of these padlock tax rates are standard Australian tax rates that you can use within your business. If you're using Xero in a country which is not one of their main supported ones, you can still use Xero, but you will have to set these tax rates up yourself. So for example, a client of mine that I was dealing with recently based in Indonesia, there were no tax rates in here, so we had to get their accountant to set them up based on their requirements. So then down the right hand side of the organization, we've got a chart of accounts setting. So again, chart of accounts is generally handled by your accountant or your bookkeeper, but you can go in here, look at your accounts by any one of these sections, and you can manage them as you need to. So from the top area here, I can add accounts in. You can also do a bulk import or a bulk export. Be very cautious with that if you're doing it whilst using your file, as opposed to when setting your file up. So if you're doing this when using your file, if you import a new chart of accounts, anything that is replaced will automatically be archived, which could cause you large problems. As I mentioned in my first video as well, some of these settings areas do happen at the beginning. So a chart of accounts is an area that you're prompted to set up when you first start your organization. So in most cases, you shouldn't need to do any massive changes here. You should only be coming in if you need to potentially click on an account to change some settings. So maybe I need to click on my bank account and change my BSB and account number, or I need to change the tax code on one. You shouldn't be making large-scale changes without accounting advice. Keeping down, then we've got financial settings. So in financial settings, I can change certain things like my GST method here in Australia, or VAT method in the UK, tax method in the US. I can do tax numbers, and also I can do whether I do tax quarterly or monthly. And finally, I can lock down certain periods. So there's a period lock date and also an end of year lock date. Period lock date means that nobody can make changes before that unless they are a financial advisor in the system, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. If you lock down the end of year, nobody can change anything prior to that date. So just be aware of those differences. So I'm just going to pop back to my settings for now, and we will go through users. So as I mentioned before, there are different user settings here. So the first thing that I can see here is users in my system and when they were active. So I've had all the recent activity in this demo company. So one thing to note here is I can't create a new user. This will be because in my file, I've not been given the access to do that. So if you have your company and you have managed users access, you'll have a new user button just here. All you have to do is type in a first name and a surname and an email address, and it will send them an invite, where you'll have to select whether you want them to have additional benefits. For example, if you want them to be able to be a financial advisor and lock periods, or if you want them to see payroll. Last option here is custom contact links. I'm not going to go into that for the moment. That more deals with external applications, and there's more information in the help file if you need it. So invoice settings, if I click into there, I can set certain parameters for my invoices. So we can see here my standard branding, and I've got a demo company logo. I've got certain things that I want to show on them, and I've also got terms listed here. So if I want to, I can go in here, I can just change the logo, which is the first stage that most businesses will do, or I can go in and make wholesale changes to a whole lot of the options here for my company. So I may want to hide a certain column, show an extra column, change some of the margins, or one of various other things that are listed here. One thing to note, and I'm not going to go into it in a massive amount of detail here, is you can create a new branding theme if you want, and then you can upload your own files. So for example here, I'm going to create a new theme, and I'm going to click the drop down, and I'm going to pick a custom theme. So rather than the standard options that I have just down here, I can pick to do a custom theme. I'm just going to call this Dan's theme for the moment. And now instead of being able to tick certain areas to show or hide, if I scroll down, I've now got a download template and an upload template. So for example, if I download this template here, this will give me a zip file in which I've got a credit note, an invoice, and a statement. And if I open the invoice template here, I'll be able to make some large changes to this invoice and then upload the changes. So we can see in this example here, I've got certain things that will fill in from Xero. So for example, my contact name, postal address, all kinds of information here. I can do things like put a watermark, put a large logo, move tables around, and so on. If you're not too sure with doing this, I would suggest that you potentially hire someone who has more design experience, as it can be a bit of a tricky area to get through, but it's there if you need it. So for the moment, I'm just going to drop back out of there to general settings again, and we'll go through the last of these. Inventory items isn't an area I'm going to go into in great detail, but if you want to, you can go in there and set those items that you sell all the time. So for example, if you work as a consultant, you may have items in there that are for your hourly rate, your day rate, expenses, and so on. So rather than having to type out each time, you can just enter them in here, and then when you put them as lines on invoices, the price, code, tax, and so on will be remembered. You've got an option for currencies. This option is visible on every single user. However, be aware that you need to be on the largest Xero subscription to enable this. So unless you're on the largest subscription, you won't be able to use multiple currencies. For more information on the subscriptions, I'd recommend you check the Xero website, as the pricing will differ from region to region. Payroll settings, again, I'm not going to go too deep into this because this is more accountant's territory, but within payroll settings, you can set up pay items, super funds, and various other details as well. Email settings is quite a useful one, where you can define settings for those forms that you send out to the system. For example, if I send an invoice, a credit note, or a statement, I can pick and say, that I want the message to say a particular thing, or the subject, and I can use these placeholders here as mail merges. So for example here, where I've got here's invoice number for invoice total, it's going to fill in these pieces of information. So if I sent a $10 invoice to myself, this would fill out with $10. That's most of the general settings covered off for the moment. The only two on the bottom right hand side here, there's Xero to Xero. That's a function where if you're sending invoices or bills to another user who uses Xero, you can use their what's called Xero key so that you can send their invoice straight through the system and you don't have to email it to them. I'm not going to go into that to detail because I don't have an example to push the invoice to, but there's a very good area in the help file on it. Finally, in add-ons, you can see any external programs that are connected into your Xero organization. I'll talk a little bit more about this for interest at the end, but for some examples of this, but this is a good way to click and connect to manage and make sure that nothing else is accessing that you don't wish it to. So that's most of the general setup areas covered off. What I'm going to do for the next one is run through some of the other tabs across the top here.